want you to think back to the first time you ever remember being truly afraid. What was it? Does it stick with you today? This is the sort of thing that we talk about on the House of Asher. Won't you join us? And welcome back, everybody. This is House of Asher. You're listening to episode 37. I'm your host, Steve Asher. It works out pretty good that way. It's been a minute since I've actually done an episode. I did like a whole heck of a bunch in about a week's time. I just had a whole lot of cool stuff going on, and so I took about a week off just to kind of ground myself, get my chi in line, all that good stuff. But like I said, we're back with, like I said, episode 37, and I'm really thrilled, really thrilled. And you guys, it's a little different for you guys, but don't be scared. Change is good. Change is good. So what we're going to do is, my next guest that we're going to speak to now is a guy that I've followed for a while. Extremely interesting guy, very eclectic taste, very knowledgeable to the degree that I'm jealous. You know, this guy has had life experiences, seen some things that, you know, I can only dream of, at least in my current incarnation. What I love about this guy is the fact that, even though the fact that this person's been all over the place, seen all kinds of different things, had all these different life experiences, has remained extremely humble, extremely open, and obviously willing to take time to talk to a little guy like myself. And the gentleman that I'm speaking to tonight is Mr. Eric Vernor. And how badly did I run that?
You got it pretty close. My drill sergeant mangled it much worse.
Oh, man, thank you. I really appreciate you being here tonight. And like I said, it's one of those quirky things that most people that follow the show know that obviously I grew up through the 70s, and all the a lot of my stuff come up, you know, with or come through the B movies and drive-ins and all that kind of stuff like that. But during that time too was a lot of the onset of changing in personal beliefs and personal religious freedoms and all this different stuff. And I that's where I kind of come across you, because I was doing a co-hosting on a show, After Hours AM, plug, and I had talked to my friend Joe, and I was like, you really want to talk to this guy? And you know, and he's a fairly open guy, but he's like, I don't know, you know, I mean, I'm kind of more comfortable in the UFO thing. I'm like, come on, baby, live a little. Let's get out, you know, come on. I want to do this, you know, this is important. So he kind of drug his feet. I kind of drug him into it, but it was a really good show. And I swore once I was ever able to do my own thing and kind of just free will it as I wanted to have you back on. So tell me what's going on with you, and maybe give these guys a little bit of a Reader's Digest, if it even still exists, compressed version of what you're about. What's your bag?
Well, my writing career, I guess you could say, started in 2004 when I put out Embracing the Darkness, Understanding Dark Subcultures. That was my way of trying to understand all the different, dark and spooky people, you know, goths and witches and Satanists and BDSM and, you know, death metal and all these other things people were afraid of. And then I became friends with some of the, you know, people that lived the lifestyle, and then I got friends with, the heads of these organizations. And the more I got to talking to them, I realized they were just real people, just regular folks, just wanted to express themselves in a different way. And lo and behold, I realized I had more in common with them than I did most so-called normal people. So that led me into a career of not only writing but publishing and filming documentaries on subjects like vampires, their origins. I've worked on a travel show of creepy, cool places all over the United States that may or may not be haunted. And I do a lot of artwork based on horror themes and gargoyles.
Fantastic artwork, by the way. Fantastic.
Like well, thank you.
Well, there's again, everything's media and movie clips to me. If I like lost that segment in my brain, I would be mute. But there was a film I grew up on called Nightbreed, and
Oh yeah.
it had that thing that kind of like the early Frankenstein movies did, that the monster, what was perceived as a monster, a lot of times was the victim, and even like Night of the Living Dead, the way it got turned around was, we were kind of the monsters in the end. And it was so funny because, like you were talking about, seeing these people and then finding out that honestly you had more in common, like you said, with these guys and what I call the straights. It's just, I've always been that way myself. So it was so funny because, like I said, growing up, this is Western Kentucky, so like coming up through the like 70s, so obviously I had like a lot of musical influences, everything from my mom and dad's country and doo-wop stuff to my sister's like disco and ABBA stuff, and then my brother's like Uriah Heep and Sabbath and all that stuff, and which my slant leaned more toward that. And I also kind of went from probably like Scorpions and Van Halen and stuff, which are fine, and I still enjoy those guys. But once I stepped off into like thrash metal, and then like my gateway drug into punk was like Metallica, and like seeing all these Misfit shirts and seeing all Angel Witch stuff, and then once I found like horror punk and stuff like that, especially like Misfits and Undead and all that stuff, and it's just like this felt like home, because when I was a kid, and I know this is about you, but of course I always say this, I was a really scared kid, and I'd had experiences with, I don't know, I can't say that they're ghosts. I don't claim that they're a ghost. I don't know. I just know that there's certain energies and certain manifestations. But I would go to the libraries, and so I would be in there reading about, like Hans Holzer and things like that. And so I'd be going up to him and go, well, hey, look, I need a book on ESP, I need a book on spontaneous combustion, and do you happen to have the rites of exorcism? That I can print out.
We're separated at birth as brothers or something, because a lot of your interests are just like mine.
Well, it seems like there's that commonality there, and I was definitely like a monster kid. I grew up on all that, and there was like, ooh, it's scary, but it's kind of cool. It's kind of like the flame will burn you, but man, it's so warm. There was that drawl there, and where some people would kind of go, well, either it's too spooky, too freaky, whatever, or they kind of go, it's kid stuff. I never grew out of it. As I went into becoming a father and this and that, I did the standard, especially when I was working in corrections and stuff. I was kind of button down guy. But then as I got a little bit older, because like I said, I'm almost 50 now, and I always heard if you haven't grown up by the time you're 50, you beat it. You beat the game. So
well, we're on a good track then, because I'm 47 and I've made a career out of this.
It's all good. Yes, I'm saying that, man. Let's make a make a fort out of some couch cushions and stuff. It'd be great. But no, seriously, it's just one of those things where like I told you, my little world in here. I've got Kolchak the Night Stalker and Trilogy of Terror posters, and Count of Five sign stuff, and spooky creepy dolls and all kinds of crap, and that's just my zone, and like my kids, they did not have a chance. My wife's a lot more straight-laced, and by the time the kids were 10 or so, we were having like Rocky Horror Picture Show for Thanksgiving, because they had the big turkey scene, and it just became part of our Thanksgiving. I never knew that was a thing. I thought it was just us, and so that became a thing. And then it's just like you said, creepy and off-putting just kind of became our norm. And then people were just like, that's just the Ashers, and once they
it's kind of like the idea that we're all just the Addams family.
Right. Well, I have a good friend, Mike Syke, and he's up around the Pittsburgh area. Have you ever heard of Trundle House?
Yes.
Yeah. He's a big wig with that. He's like a big steampunk, and it's just a good guy, just old school kook, and does like a really solid Fester impersonation. I'm envious, but But he was another guy that you had that similar vibe, which is so funny though. Where it's like where yours went, you definitely went more into the literary area and off into more of a religious seek out. Where my thing was kind of like, I don't know, like I was really hung up on like stuff like In Search Of and all that, which kind of led me into interest of all these different folklore and mythos and okay, well, what's the roots to this? There's got to be some truth to this, and a lot of times you find some commonality between this and that, and all different cultures have different beliefs and stuff. And it's so funny that mine went that way. His went into kind of the kooky Rocky Horror Picture Show and reenactments, and yours went into literary and deeper forays into understanding religious natures and the good and bad, air quotes, of what makes up man and why man is this way. And but
I guess what fascinated me about it is why was I drawn to it, and why were other people like me drawn to this sort of love of the macabre? Everything from Edgar Allan Poe and Lovecraft to Bram Stoker, Mary Shelley, all the classic quintessential elements of horror. And I think you touched upon it earlier about the idea of the monster as actually the maligned one, and the real people out there are the monsters, because that's definitely a Mary Shelley aspect of you almost pity the monster, and then the doctor and the villagers with their pitchforks and torches are the ones that are out of their minds. So to me it's always been a bit of the motto that we may be strange and kooky, but at least we're okay with our own personal inner darkness, our shadow, if you want to cite psychoanalyst Carl Jung. We're more okay with the other half of our personality, whereas other people bury it and deny it so much that when they do snap, nobody can believe it.
Right. Well, see, whereas you took it to the more I would say Ivy League, I would have been more like Gabba Gabba We Accept and One of Us, sort of the Todd Browning freaks concept of it. If your thing is going to be slightly askew from mine, and that's okay. Conformity isn't the answer for most people that's like this. And I've dealt with people that have been because I've worked with the penitentiaries and law enforcement. A lot of these guys had that vibe, and it's one of these things like a guy can what's the terminology? A freak can recognize a freak, an oddball can recognize an oddball. You don't have to say a word, and they can smell it on you. And these guys, we were talking about something, maybe they're listening to like Typo Negative or something, and I'd make a comment, and they're like, okay, you're down with that, and I'm like, well, I mean, I like this and that, maybe better, but whatever. And then so we were talking about this and that, and then once they kind of can see there's that, okay, well, he's not judging me. They're not here trying to convert me. They're not here trying to, whatever, because my whole deal was, look, your punishment is confinement. I'm here to make sure that you get through the day, you're not murdered, you don't murder me, you don't murder someone else, and we all go home safe, and you finish your time, but
makes sense.
With respect and honoring your life, because all lives are precious. And so there's that thing where people of a certain cut and a certain stripe, it seems like, I don't know what it is, and sometimes it seems like the outcasts are more forgiving of individuality and that than the mainstream, because like you said, anything that steps out of line is a danger. That's a heretic. That's a
I definitely agree with that. I mean, we have always, no matter what flavor of the dark side, I guess you want to call it, is whatever facet, I guess you could say, group, identity group that somebody wants to belong to, whether it's anything from a horror fan to, into the paranormal, which is a little more mainstream, all the way to the darker edge of BDSM and whatnot, is we're more okay with being different because we're willing to look into the shadow of ourselves, like Nietzsche or Jung would say. and realize that that's just another aspect of all humanity's collective unconscious. And we're just more okay with our differences. And, I think that's what brings out goth for a lot of people is it was that love for the darker aesthetic, everything that's classic horror, everything that has a certain motif or aesthetic feel to it, or certain type of music. I mean, I don't care if it's Evanescence, Nine Inch Nails, whatever your particular slant, because there's so many splinter groups within each subculture. From the rivet heads, the club scene, to the more aesthetic, poet shirt wearing goths, to they all have their own distinct differences, but they all appreciate that outsider element.
Right. Well, I mean, and there in itself is kind of the answer to it. It pulls it calls to you. It's like, again, to Frankenstein, they're playing the violin, that melancholy, that yearning, that emptiness, but that emptiness fills something in you. That emptiness isn't empty in a way. It's resonance. It resonates something within you, and not to try to get deep, but that's the way I've always felt with it. Be it horror, be it classic literature, Lovecraft and those guys. There's something about it. I would much rather walk, down a street that's. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I love Star Wars and all that stuff growing up. I would much rather walk down a cobblestone street with a gas light any day. That's just a part of it, and I think that it's. I don't know. It's when people sometimes ask, it's like, why are you into that? I'm like, that's like asking me, why do I like to breathe? I can't explain it any better than that. I know it might sound melodramatic, but maybe that kind of fits the part. But it's just
to a degree. I mean, that's one of the hallmarks of at least the goth aesthetic is. A bit like in Interview with the Vampire, Rice's work was very nihilistic and, a bit despair, where Louis' character was coming from anyway. But the overall was, they don't feel like they belong to the mainstream, the modern society, the stereotype of what you have to be, that's expected of you, those kind of constraints.
Well, something that you were talking about Anne Rice. It's so funny because, like, especially some of her later work that really kind of touched on religion and stuff like that. It's so funny because it hits certain people funny. Which, when you have, obviously, if you've ever watched goth videos and stuff like that, there's a lot of iconography or iconic images of things, of churches and crosses and this and that, and it's not. People used to really get hung up on it, and I'm going like, look, it's not a what's the word? A blaspheming of whatever this and that. It's there. It's part of it. It's a component.
Evanescence is a Christian rock group, but they don't overemphasize that part of their personal beliefs. But I would call them a goth band, and then you have everything in between. To Ghost. They call themselves a satanic group, but they truly aren't. I mean, if you want to talk about a real Satanist who's into darker metal, there's King Diamond. He is a member.
Yes.
So you've got a very wide range from Christian to Satanist to everything in between and nothing at all.
Right.
They're all just trying to explain and express their own passion for things that lurk in the shadows and deep within themselves.
Well, I know when I was like, what's even today, because people talk about, and this may get me in some heat, but there's a lot of people do praise bands, and that's great. I'm like, like Slayer's my praise band. This band over here is my, King Diamond, and even to the point of guys like Marilyn Manson and stuff like that. If people get past the aesthetic and get into what's behind the imagery and to the heart of what's being said, and not even so much what's being said, because you may look at something just like, well, again, because I grew up in punk, people go, oh, they're slamming into each other, they're violent. No, that's a joy. That's a okay. Like there's churches that are very physical and very animated in the spirit. I'm trying to be very respectful of people.
It's kind of the same thing. I mean,
Right.
when you look at pagan religions, the neo-pagans, the New Age occultists, when they do ritual, it's no different than other religions in the Judeo-Christian aspect of prayer. They're each trying to do their own thing, just slightly different, but the heart of the feeling is still very much genuine and a good thing. It's just the semantics of there's no who is right so much as what is the path and what is the direction you take in life that is most true to yourself, that you can get through our existence.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing was too for me that talking to people of different faiths, which to me it's all energy, it's all spirit in regards of intent and what you're doing with it. Because I've talked to people about different things, like I'm blanking on the name, like the Day of the Dead stuff, and a lot of the Mexican holidays and all that. That people take it completely wrong, and there's even people that worship, or in regards of, not, I'm going to say worship, that's the wrong term, use as sort of their icon Lady Death, but it's not, oh, death is so cool. It's like, do not fear death, embrace life. Death
Right.
is death. Death's going to take care of itself. We're here to live. We're not here to die.
Right. I think one of the hallmarks of the Gothic aesthetic, the mentality, is very similar to other cultures, even, where it's appreciate life because you're eventually going to die. And I think because of that, a lot of people tend to live life to the fullest and enjoy every aspect of it, and don't get so bogged down, because they're more willing to embrace that reality.
Well, I think that, and again, this is just my own personal view. If you go back to the time, and I think there's a reason that people embrace the Gothic, Victorian, or Edwardian times, that people died left and right, man. People would doing fine. What's wrong with Mary? Well, she's got consumption. She died 2 days ago. I
Yeah.
just seen her, and whatever, and people's families with just short lives, brutal lives, dirty lives, and it was one of these things that they lived hard and whatever, and it was, like you said, death was there, and we didn't have that separation that we do now, which is still there, but we like to play that game, to where there's sort of that thing of, oh, well, that couldn't happen now, or this is over here. I mean, in our modern world, you go to places that would be considered third world countries, which I think is sort of a slight, because there's a lot of beauty and there's a lot of honesty in those situations, sometimes, and not to say that there's not definite brutality and what's the word I'm looking for? Just blight and just hardship, but there's also some beauty in being real about your situation that seems like we have lost, and I think that's why a lot of people go to that, because if you are sort of a dualistic person, which I do consider myself that, you're either going to be very honest to people and open about it, or you're going to kind of keep it to yourself. But if people, because people sometimes will say, look, what do you feel about it? I'm like, do you really want my opinion? I'm going to be as sweet as I can, just because I try to be a good person, but I will tell you what I think, and usually people go, okay, well, okay, they'll take it and go, well, look, I asked, and so you told me the truth. And sometimes it seems like I said, there's more honesty in death in regards of that, if it makes sense, if it doesn't sound too garish in that time period. And I know that's why, even God, man, even back in the day, like Ozzy, and Sabbath and all that stuff, and there was always that Gothic medieval element.
Right. I think if you're familiar with a very prolific author over in England, he kind of inspired me to write, especially in the original nature that I did was Gavin Badley. He wrote Goth Chic, Dissecting Marilyn Manson, and Lucifer Rising, which was all about rock and roll, the devil, and Gothic symbology.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Well, I think he'd be great for your show. I'll try to put you in touch with him.
Super, I appreciate that. Well, because we were talking about in regards of music and then how people respond to this and that, and how people respond to the different stimuli. Because, like you said, you took a direction, I took a direction. My friends have taken directions. Let's talk a little bit about, the elephant in the room in regards of this area, because we where I live is in the Bible Belt. And
same here. I'm Upper Indiana, so I'm not too horribly far from you.
Okay, like you're not in the belt buckle, but you're close. So,
Yeah.
And like I said, and there's good things that come from. I don't want to necessarily say. How do I say this? Okay, I think that there are basics. Try not to mistreat each other. The kind of commandments thing. Treat people right. Don't mess over that. Don't covet that person's oxen or whatever. All good stuff. And I think that in itself is a good thing, and that's one of the things that I do like living here, raising a family here. That there's that openness and there's somewhat of that brotherliness, which I think it's true of anywhere, though. I've been in a lot of places where they were Buddhist or they were Hindi or they're whatever, and they had the same component. It just had a different name. Oh, we're Coke. Okay, we're Pepsi. That's cool. It's all the same thing. It's all the primal power and all that. But what I was going to talk about was the whole Satanic Panic, because I remember by the time that was really popping, I remember, like you said, all the Memphis situation, and
West 3.
Yes.
Yep.
Those guys, and then of course there was the Rod Farrell situation, which if anyone is from this area that's listening, in Murray, Kentucky, there was this group of kids, and they just kind of got out of control, and they went off, and there had been a murder that had happened in Florida, I believe, and
Mm-hmm.
it was Roderick Farrell's girlfriend's grandparents, I believe, and they
Yeah, I
or
agree.
mom and dad. Okay, well they weren't that old because I think they were about my age, and it just was really bad.
A lady named Charity. I think they were both in mid to early teens. Rod Farrell was, I believe, I want to say 17, and this is back in 1989 when they went and did this, or no, it was 98. Sorry, and he killed a Florida couple with a crowbar, and Farrell had long been heavily drawn to the vampire aesthetic, and he wanted power. He wanted to not be this small geeky kid. He had this charisma where other people flocked to him and did what he said. But he had such a troubled life. Always getting into problems. His mother, who I happen to know outside of social media, she sent me artwork and poetry, original photos of Rod right before all this happened, and I've got stacks of court documents. I'm very familiar with the Farrell case.
Well, I know that the right at this time there was so much overlapping, because this was like, it was sort of on the tail end. Because I understand too, in the South there was a lot of times stuff happens on the coast and it ripples slowly into the South.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the heartland, it takes a while. And I remember, of course, was it like 80s, late 80s, like the PMRC and Tipper Gore and all that stuff. And of course, oh my God, these albums are making people kill each other, and Judas Priest, shoot, or whatever, and Suicide Solution and whatnot.
All during the same time.
Right, and it all, like you said, and it all overlapped. And then you had the media, like you had Geraldo, and then you had I think it was like Morton Downey Jr., and then you had all these different shows that sort of seemed like it inflamed the fight.
There were so many hot buttons around that time period, and you have to remember, guys, that we're older. We don't instantly go, oh, let's look it up on the internet. You know, the stuff with the Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal scare. This
Vampire the Masquerade and all that.
Exactly. That was huge. Those were the villains that caused it all. And this was long before the internet was ever created. We didn't have cell phones. You know, it was back in the day when, in the late 1980s it started to die out during the 1990s, which is around the time I graduated high school and went into military. So, you know, as a teen going into 20, you know, I experienced all this. I wasn't, of course, a member of any of these subcultures, although mentally I was more goth than anything. I wore all black all the time, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the trench coat mafia, you know, Marilyn Manson sort of look or anything. It was just regular, nice clothes, but they were all black because I was on the outside expressing how I felt on the inside, you know. But it's not like I was, you know, the Columbine kids.
Thuggish.
You know?
Well, there's a thing, and I use this word with all due respect. There's a certain dandy element to dressing up, and, you know, kind of have kind of the white cotton kind of flower, you know, not pleated. What's the term? Where it's kind of got the frilly shirt and stuff, and you definitely, you know, like you said, it has that Interview with the Vampire-esque quality to it. And you were talking about like all the games and stuff. You know, the only thing, because I was a D&D guy, only thing that, you know, D&D really, you know, conjured up for me was no dates. You know, because like I said, it's just like, you know, I'm like, nah, I can't. I'm saving up for this new die set. You know,
right.
It just wasn't. You know,
we were the freaks and the outcasts because we loved stuff that wasn't considered baseball, apple pie, and, you know, the American flag. You know, we were just being ourselves.
Well, yeah, we weren't. You know, I mean, and I'm laughing because my brother Mike listens to this, and he's like my number one fan. But he was my older brother, and he was very much into the kind of rock and roll, you know, Dave TV all day, all night, you know, T-top car. He was the dude. He was that dude, man. And God bless him.
One of the popular kids, but we weren't, right?
Right. Well, no, it was just like, I never even tried. I mean, it took me years to get into playing guitar because my was my guitar dude, and I wasn't really so much into it. Now I loved bass and stuff because of like Geezer Butler from Sabbath, and then, like, you know, Cliff Burton and guys like that. But, you know, I really dug like chamber music and stuff. I was a freaking weird kid. You know, this is a conversation I had, and if anyone listens and they want to help me out, you can help me out. I'm looking for a fresh pig, bovine or a pig heart, because I want to make a specimen in a jar. And this is a conversation. I was walking through Walmart on the phone going like, yeah, I don't care how big. I don't care if it's an infant or an adult. I just want that heart. And I'm walking past, and I saw a woman look back at me like, "What the frick?" And I'm thinking, "Oh God, man, I'm out of my element. I got to watch what I'm saying." But that was that thing where, you know, you're talking about they're the cool kids and this and that. I remember like I said, my brother was very much into that world. But like you said, all those kids that were off into that in, like, you know, like say early ministry and the Lords of the New Church and all that stuff. You know, I got turned on a lot of that stuff on like Night Flight and stuff like that, and Another State of Mind and all those documentaries and all that cool stuff. And which, of course, by punk also found like the Cramps and all that kind of rockabilly stuff. But like you said, some kids took it to a whole other direction, which is kind of what Roderick and them did.
Right. He got so immersed into what he felt was the reality of Vampire the Masquerade. The vampire subculture was starting during that time period, but they had no ties to him. They disavowed themselves from his criminal activities. I want to stress that. Mm-hmm. Whereas they embraced the lifestyle and the aesthetic and the artificial fangs and contacts because they loved the theater of it, and the game is where the community came from.
Right.
But it was an insane appreciation. Although, you know, with some of the community members, you know, you could say they're a little more out there than others, but they're still good people. You know, they're not crazy. You know.
Do you remember? And I'm sorry to interject. Do you remember the Tom Hanks movie? I think it was called Mazes and Monsters. There was a movie where he played a magic user, and they were playing this game, Mazes and Monsters. Well, he really got into it, and he would start thinking he's seeing this like Gorgoloth or something, some sort of like lizard type creature, and these kids were chasing him, and he would kind of slip in and out of this character, almost like schizophrenia or split personality or something.
Right.
And I remember he was on a subway or something, and they said, it was really bad acting. So the guy's like, "Yo, man, give me what's in your bag." It was just horrible. And he's like, "Well, these are my spells. I guard them with my life." And I'm thinking, you can already see it going downhill. And so of course they try to grab for it. He pulls out this little dagger, ceremonial dagger, jabs the guy, and then he wakes up. "I've got blood all over me." You know how Tom Hanks has voice. "I don't know where the blood's from." And it's just like, oh my God, seriously. It went from that to him stabbing a guy. He ended up basically being more or less institutionalized. His friends would come visit him, and he would talk into character. He never broke character, and it for some reason that it struck me as like such a comical version of this, but this was so much more dire, and it went, and the press ran with it, law enforcement ran with it. Churches ran with it, and that's not to say that there's not people that did horrible stuff and grab cats and sacrifice them, and people trying to
I'm sure
dig up
jumping
bones.
on the bandwagon of the hysteria that was spread by people that wanted to make a name for themselves in law enforcement, peddling one lecture and book after another on being occult experts when half the stuff they put out was a lie. The book Michelle Remembers was written by one of the investigators who later ended up marrying Michelle. So, it was so convoluted even back then that very few people, unfortunately, saw through the joke.
Right.
That it was just a very sad, manufactured moral outrage against a bunch of people that just appreciated, the cultishness of horror movies and vampires and heavy metal.
Well, I remember too, there was sort of a McCarthyism type quality to it, witch hunt quality, and that immediately, like, people was like, "Oh yeah," because they were talking. There's like people thought, because there was a thing here at the school, and there was like, "Oh, well, yeah, we saw your friend Bill there." I won't give the guy's last name. This guy I grew up with. I said, "Yeah, Bill was there," and I'm like, "What? Bill wasn't even in school at that point." And people swear up and down, and I'm like, "Nah, this guy's more of an atheist. I don't think he's." I mean, maybe in an extremely clown type situation, like just to completely be like a old school hipster, kind of like just to do it ironically or something, to come up in a cloak like that. But he didn't buy that. I mean, and I'm just like, I don't think that. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen. There may have been some people out there, but there was a thing, and they shut down the school, and it was a big thing, and kids were freaking out, and people pulling their kids out of school, and it was like, whoa. And it was just like, it was kind of scary, because like, I'm kind of in them circles, I was thinking back in them circles,
You're
my proper
about
English.
coming for you, right?
I'm like, yeah, I'm not that far from, what, 7 degrees or something of Kevin Bacon. I'm like, 4 degrees from Satanic Panic, and I'm like, okay, well, because at the time, I used to have like real long hair, and then I got into punk, so I shaved my head, and like I'm talking this, like shave my head, shave my eyebrows, all that, combat boots. I look kind of different, and so I already stuck out like a sore thumb. So I'm thinking, I don't need this. I do not need this. And I remember I actually met, like, kind of crossed paths with Rod, and they were at a Hardee's. It was right after me and my wife had gotten married, and we had to run to Murray Hardee's to get like quarter pounder burgers. I don't know what the deal was. So anyway, very benign, boring story. But we're trying to get through the door, and here comes this guy, and I'm trying to carry stuff out the door. He kind of walks in, and most people kind of like, "Oh, let me hold the door for you." He just kind of walks, closes it on me. I'm like, "Have a good night, Dracula," because it kind of upset me, not knowing that this guy was already kind of a donkey on the edge, to use a Shrek term. And and I thought back about man, we could have went to the car. If the guy had clocked in, he might have killed me and my wife. And it was a very strange thing. But then again, I also think maybe if I had said something a little bit kinder to him, but I'm thinking if the guy was going to kill somebody, he's going to kill somebody. I can't make it.
Yeah. He was way far gone. Nothing you could have said or done would have changed the outcome of his actions. So don't beat yourself up over it. He was predestined by his own thinking and erratic behavior long before you ever encountered it.
Well, that's my nature to say it's my fault. I did it wrong. But let me say this: we're winding down the last few minutes of this. Where can people contact you? Where can people find your books? Where can people learn about your different seminars and talks and different cons you go into? If you can throw me about a minute of that, that would be great.
Okay. Well, you can find me on all social media under Eric Vernor, or my old pen name Corvus Nocturnum. I still use that. It's CorvisNocturnum. I write under Corvus Nocturnum, but I also write prolifically under ER Vernor. You can find my work on Amazon, but I strongly recommend if you order books off of darkmoonpress.com. I can autograph any of them through there. And I've got a really busy schedule this fall, but this next Saturday I'm going to be at Madison Seminary with Michelle Belanger from Paranormal State, and Chad Lindbergh from Fast and the Furious, Supernatural star. We're raising money to fight cystic fibrosis there for a paranormal ghost hunt at the Madison Seminary.
That's great, man. Like I said, and it's wonderful to see the fact that because I know you are that busy to actually take out time to do that, and that speaks a whole lot about your character. And
well, thank you. Yeah, I'm booked basically every single weekend, starting a month ago, all the way up to the weekend of Thanksgiving.
That's great. I mean, like you said, and it just shows again your work ethic. I do want to say that I appreciate you being on, and because, like I said, I know you have a lot going on, and it means a lot that you actually come on here and talk to me and to the folks here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my little fade out here, and I want to thank everybody for listening. And again, my friend Eric for being so kind to show up. I want everybody to enjoy what's left of their day. I want you to get out there and drink deep the dregs of life and make merry. And as the night descends and the shadows grow long, still a good idea to check under your bed, check your closet, check out the back door. You never know, you might have somebody in a cloak running around. Probably not, but it never hurts. And if so, say, hey, what's up? Maybe you make a friend. Don't judge a book by its cover. But until next time, I want you to love each other, love yourselves, and above all, stay scared, everybody. Until next time, good night.